We begin with our top story this week, CM Punk's walkout, and what I'm calling the rise of the fan revolution, which is not always a good thing, but is also not exactly a bad thing. But I think what we're seeing here over these last couple of weeks and what I think we're going to see going forward is a greater influence being exerted by crowds across the country. I don't think this phenomenon is going to be going away anytime soon. It's just something that WWE is going to have to deal with. And these people were out in full force this past week. But we'll start with Punk. You all know the basic gist of what happened based on all the emails that I've gotten over the past week asking me about it. Punk showed up at Raw last Monday night, the night after the Rumble. He met with Vince McMahon only about an hour or two before the show. And he told him, that's it, I'm going home. And he left. And he boarded a flight back to Chicago. And has not been heard from since. And so here we are with CM Punk only, 2 months? Is it 2 months? About 2 months away from WrestleMania now. Seemingly gone from the company and out of the picture. He still has several months left on his contract. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. I've been getting message after message after message about, is this a work? Or telling me flat out, this is a work. Don't be gullible. All of these different things. Punk was at the Wizard World Convention in Portland last Friday, a couple days before the Royal Rumble. He did a Q&A. Hindsight being what it is, you watch the highlights that are up on YouTube, and all the signs were there of his unhappiness. He said this is Daniel Bryan's year. He'd like to see him get the main event spot at WrestleMania, which was interesting given that Punk's one lone goal, he's talked about this before in wrestling, is to headline a WrestleMania. And even he realizes that Bryan should have gotten that opportunity this year, and maybe he still will. But you watch the video, and Punk just seems overall disinterested in wrestling right now. He said he shows up, they tell him what to do, he does it, and he leaves. Hardly the rebel character that he was portraying back in 2011. It's almost like the system has beaten him down. He talked about not really taking a break over the last 10 years. His body's beaten up. The dude's burned out. And it has nothing to do with Batista winning the Royal Rumble. He's very friendly with Dave, and he even said in the Q&A, it's different from The Rock, and at least that, Batista signed a long-term contract. He is back full-time for 2 years, supposedly. And, I get where Punk is coming from, but I heard that, and I rolled my eyes. I know I talked about this on the Sound Off at the time, when reports were leaking out from people in the company and other wrestlers about how unhappy the wrestlers were, that The Rock was coming back to take a spot away from them. Not realizing, of course, that Rock was going to do monster business for them, which he did, and that they would all benefit from that. So I don't know why Punk is still crying about that. Those two WrestleManias with Rock in the main event did bigger business than any other WrestleMania shows ever. And there's nobody they could bring back and put in that spot short of Steve Austin in the main event, maybe, who could do the kind of business for them. And even Austin, he's not nearly as big of a star as Rock is now. He's been out of the spotlight for over a decade. So Rock was the one guy. If you could bring him back to work your biggest show of the year, you're a fool not to jump all over that. I don't think Batista's going to mean nearly as much in that spot. But to kill that rumor, it wasn't Batista. He's not the reason for Punk's discontent. It's been reported that one of the main points of frustration for Punk right now was being programmed with Triple H at WrestleMania. That was the rumored match. That was one of the top two or three matches scheduled for WrestleMania this year. And I guess, Punk's not buying what they're selling. He doesn't see that as being the kind of match that he wants to be in at WrestleMania. And I'm sure that won't make Triple H very fond of Punk, which could make things interesting when and if he ever comes back. And I'm almost sure he'll be back. Whether it takes 6 months or a year or 2 years, whatever. I mean, you can never say for sure, because look at Jeff Hardy. He was the number 2 babyface in the company at one point. Big star, making a ton of money. And he left on his own. Now, granted, he had the drug bust after that. But it's going to be 5 years, if you can believe it, and he's still with TNA. Jeff Hardy's a free spirit, does what he wants. So is Punk. It's not so much about the money with Punk, because walking out right before your biggest payoff of the year at WrestleMania is a pretty strong case, I think, made there that there are more important things to the guy than money. He doesn't seem to live a lavish lifestyle. I saw that interview he did from his kitchen with Ariel Helwani. He's got himself a nice apartment, but it's not like he lives in a fortress like John Cena does. And, there's other rumors out there that in terms of the money, he was upset because he didn't feel he was properly compensated for certain events in the past. And one other point he brought up in that Ariel Helwani interview, and this is not just, dirt sheet rumor BS, he said this flat out on camera, is that he doesn't know how this new network, which is now launching in less than a month, is going to affect WrestleMania payoffs and payoffs for future pay-per-views. Because a lot of the wrestlers, especially the ones like Punk in his position, even though he's been demoted of late from where he had been, let's say, a year ago when he still had that title run going, and he was headlining the Rumble against The Rock, and he headlined Elimination Chamber against The Rock. He had the match with The Undertaker at Mania. So he was involved in some pretty high-profile pay-per-view matches. I'm sure his pay-per-view payoffs were quite nice. Probably a lot more than somebody like a Kofi Kingston would get. But nobody knows how the launch of the network is going to affect payoffs at Mania and elsewhere for the wrestlers. Punk is among them, and apparently that was a point of contention with him, to the point where he actually brought it up in that interview with Ariel Helwani when he asked him, what do you think about the new network? As a wrestling fan, this has got to be like a dream. And Punk said, I wish something like this was around in 1997, but, and then he went into the whole payoff issue. So that's part of it. And then there's other rumors that he was unhappy, realizing he was never going to be the top guy. As long as John Cena's in that spot, it's always going to be Cena. Bryan, of course, has had this groundswell of support in recent months. And one of the reasons Punk wanted to turn heel when he did last year was so that he can be the number one guy, at least on the heel side. And I think, think back to when Edge was the number one guy on SmackDown many, many years ago. Edge carried that brand. That was a position that Edge embraced. Edge didn't want to be on Raw and get lost in the shuffle and play second and third fiddle to John Cena and Triple H. At least then, he was able to get away from those guys. He was able to get more television time and be the top guy on a brand. And there is no brand split anymore. There has not been a brand split for many years. You have one WWE. The storylines overlap now on Raw and SmackDown. And he realizes that he's just not going to be that top guy. So it's a combination of all of these different things that have led us to the point that we are at right now. And my view is this: if the guy is burned out, I get it. It's a hard lifestyle. What makes this different than Steve Austin walking out on the company in 2002? Because I got a ton of emails asking me if the two situations are identical, how do they compare? They compare a little bit, but, it's a yes and no. There's no straight answer to that question. Are they identical situations? No, but they have a lot of similarities. Austin was not happy with the plans they had for him creatively. They were going to give away the first match between Steve Austin and Brock Lesnar for free on Raw as a King of the Ring qualifier, with Brock going over. And Austin looked at that and said, fuck that. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I don't have a problem losing to Brock, but now's not the time to do it. You build up a match like that for pay-per-view. And he's right. But he was still wrong to walk out the way that he did. And today, Austin acknowledges that. He says it was the biggest regret that he has, walking out on the company back then the way he did. There's a right way and a wrong way to handle things, and he handled it the wrong way. He admits that. Because when you do something like that, even if you feel you're right for doing it, it affects everybody else in the company. It's a selfish thing to do. With Punk, this has been building for a while now. Okay, this was not one day, I don't like the creative plans for TV tonight, or one day, I think I'll go home today. The signs have been there for a while. Sounds like there was a really good chance he wasn't going to re-sign when his contract expires in July. But the thing is, he's got, five or 6 months left on his deal? You signed the contract. A very lucrative contract, I'm sure. Honor your deal. Don't walk away and leave everybody else in a lurch. And I'm not even talking about, he let the fans down. The only fans that Punk let down are the fans who paid money to see him at the live events coming up in the upcoming weeks, and for the people who paid to see him at the Access signings WrestleMania weekend, which I'll get to in a second. In terms of letting down the fans, those are the only fans that he actually let down. All these other fans, the big CM Punk, oh, he let the fans down. He let the fans down? Did you specifically pay money for a ticket to see him in the next month or two? Because if not, I don't see how this affects you. This affects the people who work in WWE. Especially heading into WrestleMania. They have plans in place. This guy's going to wrestle that guy. All of a sudden, one of your top stars walks out, and now everything has to be reshuffled. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe in the end it actually works out to everybody's benefit. Maybe we get a stronger WrestleMania card because of it. But this affects a lot of different people. Not just himself, and not just Triple H. And maybe he's right. Maybe they could do better than Punk versus Triple H. Maybe he figured he was losing the match. That'd be pretty stupid if he was going to lose, but who knows? It could be any of those things. But it's disrespectful to walk out an hour or a couple of hours before the show. Now, some people are still skeptical. They think it has to be a work. It's not a work. Not everything is a work. Some people still insist that Montreal was this elaborate work. Probably the same people who claim to see Bigfoot or little green Martians stealing socks off people's feet. Let's see how many of you get that reference. Elvis and Tupac are not off somewhere making a duet. Okay, WWE went ahead, they pulled Punk from all of the Access signings WrestleMania weekend, and they replaced him with Ric Flair. They're not going to piss off people who already paid to see Punk, and possibly, not even possibly, they're offering to refund people's money. People are getting refunds issued because when they paid for their tickets a week ago or whenever Access tickets went on sale, they were expecting, and they paid good money because I think a basic Access ticket is like $40 or $45. Those VIP signing tickets are a lot more. They may be more than double. So there are people that paid really good money to specifically see CM Punk, take a picture with him, get his autograph, and now WWE has to refund people's money. I mean, what? It's part of some elaborate angle? If they paid that much attention to detail, I'd have nothing to talk about anymore. It'd be great. But they don't. And so if Punk did bail on them and did so only a little while before the show last Monday, that's not cool. You've got to honor your commitments. Chris Jericho wasn't happy with his position in WCW. He decided he was leaving. He was going to WWE. He still had a few months left on his contract. He knew he was going to get jobbed out by Bischoff on his way out. Should he have just said, oh, in March and April, screw you, I'm going home? I'm sure WCW would have claimed breach of contract and it would have turned into a whole big legal mess. But no, he gutted it out until the end of his deal, and he made the jump. When Brock Lesnar decided, I hate travel, I hate people, I'm beat up, I don't want to do this anymore, did he hop on the next flight back to Minnesota? No. He finished his contract out. He did the job to Goldberg at WrestleMania. I'm sure he didn't like it, but he did it. He made the commitment. And he was factored into some big plans they had for WrestleMania. He didn't just go home. I'm sure if they wanted to, they could take Punk to court for breach of contract. They're not going to do that. Not if they have any hope of getting him back at some point. I don't think they want to burn that bridge. Look, he could very well come back before WrestleMania. I'm sure they're going to try. I don't know if Punk would want to listen, but of course they're going to try to get him back as soon as possible. I'm sure they would love to have him back by the time Raw comes to Chicago on March 3rd. Maybe he'll come to his senses. They just had an NXT taping on Thursday with fans hijacking all the shows that night with chants of CM Punk. Security confiscated a whole bunch of Punk signs. It's going to be very interesting to see on Raw this week and in the weeks to come what the reaction is like from the crowds at the arenas. Maybe those Daniel Bryan chants start to get drowned out by chants of CM Punk. I'm not too worried about Bryan. Believe me, people will still cheer their heads off for the guy. He'll be fine. If Punk's not back with them by that Raw on March 3rd, that's going to be a fun night, okay? We're going to have a hijacking that like we've never seen before. And I can almost have sympathy with WWE in that case. I have no sympathy for them when it comes to Bryan. They get what they deserve. But when it comes to Punk, believe me, they didn't want him to leave. This was his decision. So I think in that case, it might be fun for us to watch on TV, and it might be fun for the fans in the building that night, but I would have a little bit of sympathy for WWE because this was not... You could say that they helped contribute to this situation. Maybe they helped even cause it. But the guy walked out. Nobody forced him to do that. That was his decision. If the people there are pissed off that they expected Punk when they bought their Raw tickets and Punk's not there, blame Punk. Don't blame Vince McMahon. And the belief now is that Daniel Bryan will be slotted in most likely against Triple H, taking Punk's place at WrestleMania, which would mean the rumored match with Sheamus is off, thankfully. I think that's an improvement from what they had planned for him before. But if you're Sheamus, this goes back to what I said before about walking out and how that affects other people. You're probably not too happy about that.